I'm a former basement dweller. Had a nervous breakdown after my husband of 10 years left me, and I lost my home. Crawled back to mom and dad and shut down for a while. Over the past couple of years, I took a lot of serious steps to improve myself and get back on my feet. Losing 50 pounds and getting fit. Quitting nicotine and alcohol and Zaza. Stopping with the constant video games and YouTube. And getting involved in the community. Making real friends. I was active, healthy, and happy again. I was ready to get back to work. I was very motivated and excited. I tell my parents and they get an idea. My parents, lifelong successful entrepreneurs, decided to start a business, pet boarding. They said I could work there. Specifically, you can take care of the pets. You don't have to be upfront or anything. I was psyched and extremely grateful. I love animals, and I thought I could do it. Slowly, over the few months it took to create the business, it's dawning on me that they wanted me to run it, be the owner and sole staff member. There was no actual conversation. They were both stressed out and just got irritated if I asked questions. It did turn out that I'd be responsible for all the marketing, customer relations, accounting, remodeling, and developing the property, not to mention the practical skills necessary to care for all the pets. The property they bought can hold 30, none of which I actually know how to do. And there's no money for extra staff. Okay, I thought, I can learn. I'm motivated, and I thought I'd have mentors. I didn't know anyone in the business, so I asked my parents know who can train me, and they said they'd hook me up with some people. When that didn't pan out, I had to sit them down and tell them forthrightly that I needed extra help if I was going to do this. I needed at least one other person on board. My mom is normally the unhelpful one. You'll never know if something you do or say will piss her off. But I always trusted my dad to be the reasonable one. But this time, for the first time, he just got pissed off too. Told me it wasn't that hard of a business to manage, which was really unlike him. Then, when I persisted, he said he'd help me more, and it really seemed like that would happen. Then, about a month before opening, my parents up and leave the country suddenly, no particular reason. My mom just got angry about some stuff happening in the area and bailed, and they're completely inaccessible. Texts go unanswered, calls drop. So I have to finish remodeling, open the place, a literal fortune has been poured into it. So I can't just back out, generate interest and name recognition in the community, figure out the booking software, get a website and online presence up and going, figure out the accounting side of things, figure out pet boarding protocols. I have never worked in a kennel or even pet sat before, let alone cared for dozens of stressed out animals all at once. All directly from not working even a basic job for 3 years. All without any help or guidance. I'm on my own with this. I try my best. I buy books and read them. I find resources. I work from before sunrise until past midnight every day for months. I sit with the dogs that won't eat and hand feed them. I make sure the cats are settled in and cozy. I try to handle the business side of things, but I don't know what I'm doing, and I keep making small mistakes that add up. The business took off immediately. I'm booked solid, I never have a break. I started turning away every other customer because I'm overwhelmed. But even so, I've got to have several pets every day or the business isn't viable. It was too expensive for me to commute across town every day, and I hated leaving the pets, so I ended up moving into the kennel break room. I live here now. There's no kitchen and I use the dog shower. Work is 24/7. I never see anyone but customers. And I'm too exhausted and unhappy to even keep up a phone call with a friend anyway. It's one disaster after another. Plumbing issues, electrical problems, a large fire on the neighboring property, issues with the accounting software, harassment by homeless people. I'm not in the best part of town. Unreliable internet. People calling, texting, and stopping by all hours of the day and night, even though my business hours are clearly posted. When I did get sleep, I had nightmares about what could go wrong. Last week it was a flea outbreak. Then it was some unknown sickness, and all the animals died. Every morning, without fail, I woke up and immediately had an anxiety attack. I started setting my alarm early just so I have time to do box breathing to calm myself down in the mornings. This past week, I started having another mental breakdown. I can't sleep at all anymore. Eating makes me nauseated. I'm crying all day. I'm irritable with my customers. I have no focus. I can't breathe. I feel a sense of impending doom every day. I think of my parents and get blinding rage, and I don't want to feel that way toward them. Anyone else would be glad for this opportunity. Who gets handed a business, and one that could do very well if it was being run by somebody competent? The pets notice. Of course, I put them first every day. I make sure they're taken care of before I even think of myself. I do everything I can to make sure they're comfortable, entertained, exercised, and content. But putting on a happy face doesn't always fool pets. They can sense I'm not okay, and it makes them nervous. I'm trying my hardest to take care of myself. I get plenty of exercise by exercising the dogs. When I can eat, I eat very clean. No sugar, caffeine, gluten, artificial sweeteners, no drugs or alcohol. I'm extremely careful with my diet. I'm doing everything I can about my sleep, keeping good sleep hygiene, reading something boring when I can't fall asleep, but still I'm awake all night. I've dug up some dialectical behavior therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy resources because I've heard they can help stabilize you, and I've been doing the exercises loyally. Nevertheless, I've started self-harming, hitting myself with things, hitting my head on the wall, because it's the only thing that brings any relief when things get too intense and I can't stand it. At least I'm calm enough afterward to walk the dogs and not freak them out. But it's not sustainable. I called my dad and finally got a hold of him. I was crying and told him I wasn't doing well. He said, "Have you been dishonest about your mental health?" I said no, I was genuinely fine before, but things are too much here and I can't cope. He said, "So what, you want to just board the place up?" And I said no, I wanted to try, but I needed help. He said he'd help me, and he came back for a few days and put up a shade. Then he left again. I tell myself there are people who work horrible jobs all day long and they make it. I tell myself I can be stronger. The job is not that hard. If I quit and walk away from this business, I'll be in profound debt. I'll also have to accept that I'm an utter failure, a loser, and completely pathetic. Everyone will say I haven't improved at all since my last breakdown. I'm still the useless idiot I've always been. The humiliation would be devastating. This experience has already flushed my self-esteem down the drain. If I fail, I will never escape the shame. I'm Asian, won't be more specific, but our culture is a lot more serious about success. And a failure like this in my community really sticks to you. I was just starting to get back on my feet after everything I went through a few years ago. I don't know if I'll ever recover from this. My question is, how do I get my parents to listen? Or should I give up and shut down the business? Or if I shut down my business, what can I do about the fallout with them and the community? Now for an update. Thank you all for your replies. I'm grateful to each of you for taking the time, and I wish I could respond to everyone, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to taper off business, close my doors for a couple of weeks, and try to figure out where to go from there. I don't think my parents are going to listen to me, but it's been pointed out by a few of you that they left me unprepared with this. So it's probably okay then if I figure out a way to step away from the business. Thank you all again. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Close the place. Yes, you can. You don't want to, and that's why they did this to you, because they knew that you wouldn't want to disappoint them. When are you going to put yourself first? When are you going to kick things out of your life that don't serve you? Only you can make you happy. So you need to quit taking bookings. Once all these animals are gone, you quit. You don't do anything else. Don't even answer the phone. Let them come back and figure it out. They open the business. It is theirs. Move out and get your life started for yourself, because you know what, they don't really care about you. They don't care that they're causing you mental breakdowns. The only one that can save you is you. Just walk away. Comment 2. I used to work in a doggy daycare and pet boarding place, and it took at least 4 or 5 people per shift, 1, 2 receptionists, a manager, at least 2 kennel techs to not be understaffed. We were moderately sized. You are biting off more than you can chew, in my opinion. And if you want to keep working with animals, you need to either hire more staff or close this business and work at a more established place. In an emergency, for instance, if one dog somehow manages to escape their kennel while you're walking another, which could be more likely than you think if you wind up with a fence climber, you are not prepared to be as safe and efficient as you could be. Now, for the update. Thank you all for your comments and support. So, after deciding to taper off the business and close my doors for a couple of weeks, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I had to inform my customers, which was nerve-wracking. Most were understanding, but so a few were upset, and I couldn't blame them. I had to refund deposits and cancel bookings, which was a logistical nightmare. I spent hours on the phone and email trying to explain the situation without sounding like I was falling apart. During this time, I had a lot of internal conflict. I felt like I was letting everyone down, especially the pets who had come to rely on me. But I knew I couldn't keep going the way I was. I was at my breaking point. I decided to reach out to a local pet boarding business owner I had met at a community event a few months back. I remembered she had mentioned being in the industry for over a decade. I called her up, explained my situation, and asked if she could spare some time to give me advice. To my surprise, she agreed to meet me for coffee. When we met, I poured my heart out. I told her everything, how my parents had left me to run the business alone, how overwhelmed I was, and how I was on the verge of another breakdown. She listened patiently and then offered some practical advice. She suggested I hire a part-time assistant, even if it meant taking a financial hit in the short term. She also recommended a local accountant who specialized in small businesses and could help me get my books in order. I was hesitant about hiring someone because of the cost, but she insisted it was necessary for my mental health and the business's survival. She even offered to introduce me to a few people she knew who might be interested in the job. I left that meeting feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. I decided to take her advice. I contacted the accountant she recommended and set up a meeting. The accountant was a no-nonsense woman who quickly identified several areas where I was making mistakes. She helped me streamline my accounting process and set up a system that was much easier to manage. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. Next, I interviewed a few candidates for the assistant position. I found a young woman who had experience working in a veterinary clinic and was looking for part-time work. She was enthusiastic and seemed genuinely passionate about animals. I hired her on the spot. Having her around made a world of difference. She took over some of the daily tasks like feeding and exercising the pets, which gave me more time to focus on the business side of things. With the accountant and assistant in place, I started to feel more in control. I still had a lot of work to do, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I even managed to get a few nights of decent sleep. The pets seemed to sense the change in me, and they were more relaxed as well. But then, just as things were starting to look up, I got a call from my parents. They were back in the country and wanted to visit the business. I was filled with anxiety. I didn't know how they would react to the changes I had made or if they would be supportive. When they arrived, I gave them a tour and explained everything I had done. My mom was critical, as usual, pointing out minor flaws and questioning my decisions. My dad was quieter, but I could tell he was assessing everything. After the tour, we sat down to talk. My mom started to criticize me for hiring an assistant, saying it was a waste of money. I felt my anger rising, but before I could say anything, my dad spoke up. He said he was impressed with how I had handled things, and that he could see I was doing my best. He admitted they had put me in a difficult position and apologized for not being more supportive. It was the first time I had ever heard him apologize for anything, and it took me by surprise. My mom was taken aback by his words and didn't say much after that. My dad then offered to help me more actively, at least for a while, to get things fully stabilized. He said he would handle some of the more challenging aspects, like dealing with the city permits and any legal issues that might come up. I was skeptical but grateful for the offer. Over the next couple of weeks, my dad kept his word. He helped me navigate some of the bureaucratic hurdles and even used his connections to get a better deal on some supplies we needed. My mom, while still critical, started to come around when she saw the positive changes. She even offered to help with some of the marketing, which was her area of expertise. With their help, I was able to reopen the business with a renewed sense of purpose. I still had a lot to learn, but I wasn't alone anymore. My assistant was a lifesaver, and the accountant kept me on track. I started to see the business not as a burden, but as an opportunity to grow and prove to myself that I could handle it. I know there will be more challenges ahead, but for now, I'm in a better place. I'm taking things one day at a time and focusing on the positives. The pets are happy, the customers are satisfied, and I'm starting to feel like I can do this. Thank you all for your support and advice. It made a world of difference. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for venting to a coworker about my boyfriend prioritizing his family's dog over me? My boyfriend, 26-year-old, told me, 27-year-old female, the other day, that he wouldn't move to another city to be with me when we were talking about our future due to his family being too important. For context, my boyfriend and I have been together for 4 years, almost 5. We met at work and we just clicked. He has always been very supportive and encouraging of me, but lately I've noticed that anytime we talked about the future and where we see ourselves, he always says he sees himself in our current city because that's where his family lives and won't even consider living anywhere else. We have had multiple arguments where I've told him that I don't feel like I'm ever his priority. I have always felt like I was the second or third person on his priority list, which changed when his family got a dog. And I went down another step. We recently moved in together and it has been hard to say the least. We were both raised very differently, where I was taught to do something at that moment, if it takes less than a minute to do, while he was never encouraged to do anything, because his mom took care of it all. The issue that led to him saying that he wouldn't move for or with me started when I was showing him something that I had bought for our new place, and he ignored me. I got frustrated and walked away, leading him to give me the silent treatment. Towards the end of the night, we started talking about what was causing our issues, and that's when he said coming home made him miserable and that he just wants to go back to live with his parents. He said I expect too much from him by wanting him to do the bare minimum, and he just can't live like that. When I asked if he wanted to break up, he said he wasn't sure, but then changed his answer to no. He started talking about his future and how he wants to find a better job, and I asked him if he had considered looking into other cities. That's when he expressed that he had, but he can't do it because he can't leave his family behind. When I asked what he meant by that, he said his family will always come first, and that he wouldn't move anywhere far away from them. It's important to note that his parents spend at least 6 months every year in Mexico, and him and his sister were never close until recently when he had to babysit her as she doesn't drive. That's when he said the words that have been stuck in my head. I know you would move anywhere with me, but I can't do that for you. He then finished the conversation by letting me know, in other words, that I wouldn't ever be his top priority and to not make a big deal out of it. Ever since that day, I've been thinking about my future with him. And if it's something I want to pursue, I don't want to talk to my friends or parents about this, which is why I'm here asking for any advice or thoughts on this. Now for an update. Hi everyone, thanks for your comments. I just wanted to make something clear, which I noticed was a big topic of conversation. I wasn't asking my boyfriend to move anywhere with me. I was just asking if he had considered applying to jobs in the surrounding cities. The city I mentioned that made him say what he did is only 10 minutes away from where we live now. I personally don't think working in another city and living in the one closest to his parent should have been such a big issue. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. He basically told you he wants to go back home to his parents now. You really need to be glad he told you now and not put any more into a relationship with a man who will never put you first. Be grateful he was honest. Time to think about yourself and if you want to waste any more time on a mama-daddy boy. Comment 2. His family will always come first over you. Should you have kids with him, your nuclear family would always be second. Mama's boys make nightmare husbands. Just be grateful you found it out now and not later. And dump him if you don't want to be unhappily frustrated all of your life. Now for the update. Hi everyone, thanks for reading my last post. So after that conversation, things got even more tense between us. We tried to go back to normal, but it was like walking on eggshells. I decided to give him some space, thinking maybe he just needed time to process everything. But then, 3 days ago, something happened that changed everything. I made a mistake that I didn't realize would have such a huge impact. I was feeling really down and decided to talk to one of my coworkers about it. I didn't go into too much detail, just mentioned that my boyfriend and I were having some issues and that he didn't seem to prioritize me. I thought it was a harmless venting session, but I didn't realize that my coworker was actually friends with my boyfriend's sister. She must have mentioned something to her because the next day, my boyfriend came home furious. He accused me of spreading our personal issues around and making him look bad. I tried to explain that I was just venting and didn't mean for it to get back to his family, but he wouldn't listen. He said that I had betrayed his trust and that he couldn't believe I would do something like that. I felt horrible and apologized, but he was too angry to hear it. That night, he packed a bag and said he was going to stay with his parents for a few days to clear his head. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do or how to fix things. I spent the next day trying to figure out how to make it right, but before I could come up with a plan, I got a call from his mom. She told me that my boyfriend had decided to move back in with them permanently and that he didn't think our relationship was working anymore. I was in shock. I couldn't believe that things had escalated so quickly. I tried calling and texting him, but he wouldn't respond. I felt completely lost and didn't know what to do. I spent the next day in a daze, trying to process everything that had happened. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, wondering where things had gone so wrong. Then, I started thinking about our relationship and realized that there had been signs all along that he wasn't as committed as I was. He had always put his family first, and I had always been the one making compromises. I started to see that maybe this was for the best, even though it hurt like hell. But before I could fully come to terms with it, I got another call from his mom. She told me that my boyfriend had decided to move to Mexico with his parents for a while to get some distance and figure things out. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that he was willing to move so far away without even talking to me about it first. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I couldn't understand how he could just leave like that without any regard for my feelings. I started to realize that maybe he had never really been as invested in our relationship as I had been. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it also gave me some clarity. As I was packing up his things, I found an old photo album that his mom had given him. It was filled with pictures of him and his family, and I could see how much they meant to him. I started to understand that maybe he had always been torn between his love for me and his loyalty to his family. It didn't make the situation any easier, but it gave me some insight into his perspective. I also started thinking about my own family and how I had always been so independent. I realized that maybe I had been expecting too much from him, given how different our upbringings were. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped me see that we were just too different in some fundamental ways. In the end, I decided to focus on myself and my own happiness. I reached out to my friends and family for support, and they were amazing. They helped me see that I deserved someone who would prioritize me and be willing to make compromises for our relationship. It was a tough lesson to learn, but I knew it was the right one. Looking back, I can see that there were so many red flags that I had ignored because I loved him and wanted to make things work. But now, I know that I need to be with someone who is willing to put in the same effort and commitment that I am. It's been a painful journey, but I feel stronger and more determined to find the happiness I deserve. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for asking my pregnant girlfriend for a DNA test after she lied about her past? So for backstory, me, 26-year-old male, and my girlfriend, 24-year-old female, have known each other since 2019. We met on Tinder while she was visiting my state. She's not from where I live, and we connected immediately. I fell for her hard. We didn't start officially dating until November of last year, though. During the time beforehand, she met a guy she was working with who had a baby mama and child. The baby mama ended up passing, rest in peace, and on the day of her funeral service, she went over to his house to console him, and she ended up giving him oral intimacy. She didn't tell me until much later, and I forgave her. I told her not to meet up with him again and trusted she wouldn't. I had her location, and one day, when I was on my way to my job orientation, I caught her at his apartment. After numerous times of calling, she finally answered, but she was in the bathroom. We got into an argument. I blocked her for a while, but we eventually made up. She promised me she wouldn't see him again. This time she kept her promise, if that even matters now, and said that distance was her biggest issue. We decided that if we really wanted this, we should officially date, which we did. I came out to see her a couple times at the end of last year, and she came to my state to celebrate Christmas with both sides of my family. Fast forward to January of this year. I told her I would come see her in January, but couldn't make it due to financial troubles. Boom. I came out there twice in February and found out she was pregnant. Neither of us were expecting it. She told me she didn't want to keep it and had no plan on telling her parents because of it being so unexpected, and we don't have the funds ourselves to care for a child, which I agreed. But when she gave me the papers confirming her pregnancy, I noticed that it said she was a couple days pregnant before I had last seen her, which I thought was odd. I did some research and found that the date could be off due to it being an estimate. So I pushed it to the back of my head. We decided we should move in together and thought it would be best for her to come to my state. Since then, she has been living with me without paying rent, doing minimal things around the house, which I will admit was irritating but understandable to a point, because she is, of course, pregnant. The problem is I wasn't prepared to be paying all the bills by myself. Our rent is $2,000 a month, because she told me she would find a job before she came out here, which she obviously didn't. We recently had a talk about our living situation and decided it's best for her to move back in with her mother so she could be better taken care of and start going to the doctor. Because of her not working and me not making enough to cover rent and feed us, she wasn't able to go to the doctor since finding out she is pregnant. We scheduled an emergency room visit today, and when we told them she is 16 weeks, they came back and told us she is actually 19 weeks and 5 days. I did the math, and that is in the middle of January. This is my first pregnancy, and I have a lot going for myself career-wise. I don't believe this is my child, and I don't know what to do, or at least how to go about doing it. She leaves in 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know how to have the conversation with her that I think this is not my child, and I'd like a DNA test, mainly because it was hard enough having the conversations of her getting a job and about her returning to her family for the health of the baby, on top of the fact that we still live together for a while longer, and I don't want to foster a hostile living environment for either of us. I used to love her, but after all these issues, that love is dwindling fast. I'm also an adopted child, so the thought of this affecting the child, whether or not it is mine, is heavy on my mind. I'm really distraught about the situation, and it's causing me to slip back into a depression. What should I do? Am I overthinking? Do you guys think she had intimacy with the man she was seeing in January? Or could it be mine? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Why on earth did you keep going back to her? This official business needs to stop. If you are sleeping with someone, you shouldn't be getting involved with anyone else regardless of the status of your relationship. It's just an excuse to sleep around. Anyway, conception dates are an estimate based on your last period and are not accurate at all. Unless you are tracking your ovulation, you don't know when you ovulate. So don't rely too much on that. If she refuses to do a paternity test, don't sign anything and try to extricate yourself from this situation. Don't give in to her pleas of being homeless with a newborn. If the baby is yours, she'll do a test and prove it. This is a mess you have brought upon yourself, and you need to learn quickly. Don't keep going back to someone who cheats, and always use a condom if you don't want to be a father. Comment 2. If it says 19 weeks, 5 days, it's actually 17 weeks, 5 days. You aren't pregnant for the first 2 weeks of the cycle. Of course, every woman is different, but this is an estimate. I would still get a paternity test, but just know that it still might be yours, despite the unusual dates. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my last post. So, a lot has happened in the past 2 weeks. After finding out that she was further along in her pregnancy than we initially thought, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to confront her about my doubts regarding the baby's paternity. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I tried to be as gentle as possible, explaining that the dates didn't add up and that I needed to know the truth for my own peace of mind. She was understandably upset, but she agreed to a DNA test. We scheduled it for the following week, and the wait was agonizing. During this time, she started packing her things to move back in with her mother. The atmosphere in the apartment was tense, to say the least. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was mostly about logistics. How she would get to the airport, what she needed to take with her, and so on. I could see that she was hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I was too wrapped up in my own feelings of betrayal and uncertainty. The day of the DNA test finally arrived. We went to the clinic together, but the silence between us was deafening. The test itself was quick, just a simple swab, but the emotional weight of it was immense. We were told it would take a few days to get the results. So we went back to the apartment and continued our awkward cohabitation. In the meantime, I had to keep going to work and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. My performance at work started to slip, and my boss noticed. I had a meeting with him where he expressed concern about my recent lack of focus. I couldn't tell him the whole story, but I did mention that I was dealing with some personal issues. He was understanding, but made it clear that I needed to get my act together soon. A few days later, the DNA test results came in. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, and my heart sank when I saw the results. The baby wasn't mine. I felt a mix of relief and devastation. Relief that my suspicions were confirmed, but devastation because it meant that she had been unfaithful to me again, despite her promises. I confronted her with the results, and she broke down in tears. She admitted that she had slept with the other guy in January, right around the time I couldn't make it out to see her. She said she was lonely and confused and that it was a mistake, but the damage was done. I told her that I couldn't continue the relationship and that it was best for both of us to part ways. She left for her mother's place the next day. The apartment felt emptier than ever, but there was also a sense of relief. I could finally start to move on and focus on my own life. I decided to see a therapist to help me deal with the emotional fallout. The first few sessions were tough, but it felt good to talk to someone who could offer an objective perspective. As I started to process everything, I realized that my trust issues stemmed from my own past. Being adopted, I always had a fear of abandonment and betrayal. This situation had triggered those fears in a big way. My therapist helped me understand that while my feelings were valid, I needed to work on building trust and setting boundaries in future relationships. I also reconnected with some old friends who had been supportive throughout this ordeal. We went out for drinks, and it felt good to laugh and forget about my problems for a while. One of my friends even set me up on a date with someone they knew. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to give it a shot. The date went well, and it was nice to feel a spark of hope for the future. Looking back, I realized that I had ignored a lot of red flags in the relationship. I was so eager to make it work that I overlooked things that should have been deal breakers. This experience taught me the importance of listening to my gut and not settling for less than I deserve. And as for my ex, I heard through mutual friends that she was doing okay. She was focusing on her pregnancy and trying to get her life back on track. I wished her well, but I knew that I needed to focus on myself and my own healing. In the end, this whole ordeal was a wake-up call. It forced me to confront my own issues and take steps to improve my mental health. It also made me realize that I deserve to be with someone who respects and values me. I'm still a work in progress, but I feel more hopeful about the future than I have in a long time. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.